Bon après-midi à tous. Bienvenue à cette conférence de presse avec le ministre des Ressources naturelles, John Herron. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this media availability with Natural Resources Minister John Herron. Je tiens à vous informer que des services d'interprétation sont disponibles. Vous pouvez y accéder en cliquant sur le bouton d'interprétation en bas de l'écran. I'd like to let you know that the interpretation services are available today. You can access them by clicking on the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen. Before I turn things over to the minister, I would like to ask everyone to ensure their microphones are placed on mute. Minister, you can go ahead.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon. At the outset, I'd like to say that I'm pleased to announce good news for today about the forest fire that is the Oldfield Road forest fire. At 9 or 10 this morning, the Department of Natural Resources declared that this fire is finally classified as contained.
Pleased to be able to share that the largest fire that has seized the attention of the Department of Natural Resources, moreover, I think all New Brunswickers, was deemed contained around 9:30 this morning. That is a result of the extraordinary leadership of our firefighting team that we have within DNR. Is that we got a little bit of good fortune over the course of the weekend with some rain. Following that rain, there were efforts with with our amphibious assets, also known as water bombers. We had 5 at our disposal. I'm not sure how many were deployed and how many flights were used. Following that, we rolled in as many as 13 bulldozers and other tractors, and we were able to essentially build a firewall around that fire. So that's a result of real hard work of last week during the very extreme hot temperatures. So that's a current development that I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share with New Brunswickers today. Having said that, though, the situation remains serious in New Brunswick. Firefighters have their hands full, and we appreciate the teams coming from across Canada to help us. Les pompiers ont beaucoup.
Firefighters have their hands full, and we appreciate the teams that have come from across Canada to help us. As of 1 p.m., there are 36 fires burning in New Brunswick. This includes 6 fires that are out of control.
Today, there still are 36 fires burning in New Brunswick. 6 of those are deemed out of control. Nous avons eu la chance d'avoir.
We've been lucky enough to get some rain over the last few days and a break from the extreme heat. Unfortunately, this isn't enough. We need more rain, steady and sustained rain over several days.
Enough to receive rain over the last few days and finally got a break in that heat, from that extreme heat. What that's done is for our firefighting team is that it's bought us about 2 to 3 days in terms of getting the forest back to a level where it is not as tinder dry. Moreover, is that what those rains did, it also changed the temperature. We certainly have a much better environment from a heat perspective to be able to combat these fires. Those the rain that we did receive, and I want to be very, very cautious with my remarks here on what this means in our forests and what opportunities or new opportunities may exist. But because of that rain that we have received, there may be opportunities for us to be able to put people back to work, largely on an area-specific or regional basis. We're very cognizant of two industry-related concerns, is that we do have a finite window to be able to complete our tree planting exercises. We, of course, recognize that that activity is not that heavy from an industrial perspective. We are also very much aware that there are mills throughout the province that are on the verge of running short of wood. By no means are we in a position for us to be able to reopen the forests carte blanche at this point in time, but we may have opportunities for us to do things on a regional or an area-specific basis, but the test will be the same one. We will not put New Brunswick families and communities at risk. It is still a very serious situation given the dryness of our forest floor. I'd like to speak just for a moment, if I could, with respect to two things. On the good news perspective, we still have not lost a structure over the last week and a bit during this period where we've had a number of forest fires. And that, the tip of the hat there goes to the structure protection unit that I spoke about back on Friday. But I do want to be able to point out is that there has been an economic loss. Those fires do represent a very significant amount of our inventory from a forest perspective that we are paying attention to. And I've been asked by a few individuals to be able to try to quantify what that might look like. So not every hectare will have perfectly merchantable timber. It's always going to be a mix of merchantable and non-merchantable. So if we were speaking about exclusively merchantable timber, given that we've lost or at risk about 2,500 hectares, translated that would represent about $4 million in royalty revenue on a go-forward basis, or stumpage to the landowner. The timber itself would represent about $10.5 million in direct and indirect tax revenue to the government from the forest sector value chain. That timber would represent approximately $42.5 million in lumber revenue to sawmills. And overall, from a New Brunswick GDP perspective, it would be about $77.5 million. Now, those figures are on the higher end because it would suggest that every hectare and every component of that hectare would be merchantable wood. But at least that gives you a ballpark, is that why this is still very, very important to New Brunswickers. But above all, we are heartened that we haven't lost structures, and we have not had loss of life. We are still dealing with the aftermath of lightning strikes which we know could still ignite in the coming days, despite the rain. I do want to point out that I did misspeak on, I believe it was Friday, or perhaps it was Wednesday's press conference, is that after a lightning strike occurs, is that it's quite possible that the floor may actually have had a spark and a fire is just smoldering, and it could eventually emerge. I believe I spoke and said that could be in that condition for up to 2 to 3 weeks. I should have said 2 to 3 days. It can be a little longer than 3 days, but I did misspeak last week, so I just want to correct that for the record. Even though we've received a little bit of rain that has provided us about 2 to 3 days of reprieve, the fire situation is very fluid and can change very quickly. We've seen evacuation advisories issued for areas around a couple fires this past week, and that could be the case for communities around any fire that exists in the province. I want to stress how important it is that every household, that if you have a fire essentially in your area, in your region, that you need to make sure that you are ready to evacuate, because things can change so quickly that you might not have a lot of time to prepare. That's why we all need to plan now, so that if you do need to leave, you are ready to go. So in short, we aren't out of danger yet, and it's a good time for people to take a look around their house and take note of some areas where they can follow some quick, easy, fire-smart tips to protect themselves and their homes. So I would encourage everyone to take the time, take the effort, go to the FireSmart webpage that you can see connected to the government in New Brunswick. It's also interconnected with the Firewatch page, where we're getting most of our information about the wildfires that are currently underway. There are a number of initiatives that you can do to ensure that your home is safer should a fire be within your particular region. Those conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that might exist.
Thank you very much, Minister Herron. We will now proceed with questions from members of the media. Each reporter will get one question and one follow-up. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions.
We will now move on to questions from reporters. Reporters will have one question and a follow-up question. You can ask the questions in the official language of your choice.
Silas Brown.
Minister, I'm just curious. I think a lot of New Brunswickers are wondering, we'll use this. With the amount of rain that we got over the weekend, some people might be thinking, okay, maybe we're out of the woods. You said that bought us a couple days. How much rain realistically are we hoping for to really bring the situation back under control and potentially back to normal?
The short answer is that depends. So I'll try to answer that question as best I can, directionally speaking, is that if we had 2 to 5 days of sustained rain, something similar to what we saw yesterday, that could be immensely helpful. I think it would afford us some opportunities to be able to do things, perhaps at a minimum, on a regional or an area-specific basis. That could include commercial activities. That could include recreational activities as well. I suspect that New Brunswickers, I would suggest that New Brunswickers should prepare themselves that the openings may not be province-wide overnight, that it may be something that's more evolutionary than revolutionary. You might see an opening perhaps in the Edmundston area because they received an extraordinary amount of rain for a sustained amount of time. So that it was a very good sign to be able to say one really serious day of rain. That when it wasn't just rain, it was rain without lightning being delivered at the same time. So even last week's rain, I don't know if it was a net help. We had rain, and then we had 20 lightning strikes that actually precipitated fire. So the humidity right now is up. That's helpful in terms of cooling our forests. So I think we'll see something on a regional basis sometime following a significant rainfall.
You said that there is possibility
Alors,
commercial activity resuming regionally. How great is the risk, and how do you balance that versus, obviously, you said the desire to keep some mills going as they're potentially running out of product?
So the first test is clear. We're not going to put New Brunswick communities or families at risk. So any process, industry that we begin to restart has to be done through a very balanced and considered process. For instance, in the forestry perspective, is that should conditions be appropriate, we could begin harvesting in areas that were recipients of a fair amount of rain. We would probably still do that. Actually, we will do that initially nocturnally, meaning that we'd be harvesting at night. This is actually a common practice that we've done in past years, is that when areas have been dry, is that we've re-vectored the forestry permits to be so that those activities could only occur at night when the risk is lower.
Okay, next is Natalie Sturgeon with CHCO TV and the Courier.
Thanks for taking my questions. I wanted to revisit the question I asked a little bit earlier this week about the cause of some of these fires, in particular Oldfield and Irishtown, which were I think, not anymore, I guess not the Irishtown, but do you not have a preliminary estimation of the cause of those fires?
So I've inquired with the fire center. They've responded is that at this point in time, it still will be under investigation, and that's in both cases. Even the Irishtown one where the fire has been completed, we'll know soon enough. There are fires that are more abundantly clear. The fire that I don't know if I would say that it's I'm most fussed about, but the Beaver Lake Stream fire, we've got visibility to that was the result of a lightning strike. That one was particularly clear. So we will share that information once it is known. I'm just as eager as you are to be able to, one, fully learn what caused those fires, and if we could have done something different, and secondly, I'm eager to share that information with New Brunswickers.
And I just wondered, Hurricane Erin is currently in the Atlantic, and it's a pretty significant storm. And although it seems like it's heading, kind of back out into the Atlantic, further away from the Atlantic seaboard, it will bring strong winds along with it. I'm just wondering how you're preparing to kind of have that additional complication along the shorelines.
So I don't have an update from the center with respect to Hurricane Erin specifically. If it brings added moisture and it brings rains, good. If it brings lightning, bad. That is information that we can provide in a written update on the next occasion.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Natalie. Next is Barbara Simpson with Post Media.
Thank you very much. Minister, I'm wondering if you can elaborate further on the firefighting response right now in Beaver Lake Stream. I see the fire has grown substantially. I guess have resources been moved over from the Oldfield road fire now that it's been contained over to the Beaver Lake stream fire?
So, so far on the Beaver Lake stream fire, you'll see if you go to our wildland fire reporting system itself, the PDF is what I'm looking at right at the moment. You'll see that there's 40 persons that have been allocated to that particular fire. They represent the 40 highly trained firefighters that are coming from the province of Ontario, or that have arrived from the province of Ontario. They have been dispatched to that particular fire. You'll also see that that the overhead assets that have been allocated to that fire are slated at 5. One of those would be a surveillance plane, also known as a bird dog plane, that actually identifies where the water bombers are to unload their water cargo. So there are a number of water bombers that have been deployed, that have been or will be deployed again to the Beaver Lake stream fire. It is very, very remote, and I know you're just as aware of the New Brunswick geography as I am, but just for folks to understand where that is located, it's relatively north. It's north of the Renouse Highway and south of Mount Carlton. It is very, very, very removed from people. Also road infrastructure. So it's going to be very challenging for us to be able to get the assets that we'll need to wrestle that fire down. But we will deploy the same type of methodologies that we were using for Oldfield, where we were successful.
And I guess just a follow-up, Minister, I guess what fire are you most concerned about right now in terms of the impact on residents?
For the impact on residents?
Or potential impact, I should say, of residents.
I think I really would like to be able to defer that particular analysis to our folks at EMO and public safety, but I guess I will reiterate the fact is that if there is a risk to New Brunswickers, to their homes or to their structures, there will be an evacuation alert or notice that, and if things get serious, from that point, is that if they do have to move, that notification will be very, very loud, very, very clear through multiple platforms for New Brunswickers to move. The one that I was maybe, because you did ask what I'm most concerned about, the one that was on my radar screen just for a moment in time, it's not particularly large, is the one that's located near Kujbakwak, but that seems to be to have the appropriate amount of attention that hasn't required any type of evacuation notice.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Barbara. Next, Anna Mandan with Global.
Good afternoon, Minister. You mentioned that this rain has essentially bought 2 to 3 days. How important are the next few days in kind of the future of what these fires look like?
So what's happened over that with those rains? It's enabled us to be able to mobilize our assets to actually be more on almost an attack mode. Like, we had a lot of things being thrown at us in the very beginning. Is that the forest floor was tinder dry, and then which already had its own inherent risks. Following that, we had lightning strikes that precipitated 20 additional fires as well. So now we've got a little bit of moisture on the floor of the forest, helpful. And we now have cooler temperatures. That's helpful for us to be able to fight fires in a better environment. Also, the humidity is up, which also is helpful. So the fire center shared with me earlier today is that despite the larger fires that we have right now, we're in a position where we can do some strategic, longer-term planning in terms of how we get at those two other larger fires in the same manner that we were able to do with Oldfield. So, and it does kind of hurt my feelings to use the word longer-term planning. It does mean that these fires are going to be with us for the month ahead, absent of a torrential downpour throughout all of New Brunswick, but it does enable us to be able to get back on our front foot again.
And looking at the Oldfield Road fire, I know that there's this mention that it's under control, but there's the possibility of it jumping. How concerned are you of it going back to spreading? How concerned should residents be about that fire right now? So
the terminology is contained. So what that means is that we've got a firewall or a hose around the fire, so it can't grow anymore. So there's a different part of the nomenclature or classifications that the next step would be for us to be able to, from contain would be under control. So it's in a good place right now, considering where it was even 24 hours ago. But more work needs to occur for us to be able to have that level of certainty. That fire had jumped very early, just over a week and a half ago, and ran to the degree that it did. So it's absolutely vital that we're vigilant, which is in part and parcel why we still have the precautions in place that we have.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Anna. Next is Jeff Goodfellow with MBS Radio. Jeff Goodfellow with MBS Radio. Okay, we'll move on to Alexander Johnson with allnewbrunswick.com.
Good afternoon, Minister. I just wanted to circle back to the talk around forestry activity. Is there any specific criteria that you can share that the province is looking at when it comes to making these decisions around when and if those activities can resume?
Sure. The criteria would be, I guess, first and foremost, is does the intensity of that particular activity have the capacity to ignite fire and put our families and our communities at risk? So that's the overall test, and then we have to have a balance and do this in a very considered way. So the test may very well be is, does the activity have the ability to be able to accept and work with a suite of precautions? So, for example, should we open up forest harvesting in an area that had received a degree of precipitation? Then that would be helpful. Do we have and in that same situation, we would have precautions where that harvesting the harvester would have to have an abundance of water in tanks for them to be able to deal with any potential spark. They would have accompanying them fire spotters to ensure that they're on the lookout for any potential spark as well. So it might come down to that has that particular area or region, because I do envision this being done on an area-specific basis, received a degree of rainfall, but also do they have the necessary equipment to be able to deal with anything that could generate a spark?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, just want to make sure I understand this correctly. You were saying earlier that right now we're something like 2 to 5 days of sustained rain from being able to look at resuming these activities. Is that where we're at across the region?
Well, I'm interested to act whether to receive more data about even the rainfall that we had on the weekend. It is possible that there could be an opportunity for us to do something in an area-specific basis that, and since we're speaking on a forestry perspective, that I could see tree planting being something that we could do even during daylight hours in certain areas, perhaps not all areas, but there still would have to be a suite of precautions in terms of fire spotters and water, even in that type of activity where we are right now. For true forest harvesting, again, I would suggest that an area that would be considered would have likely received a degree of rain, and perhaps what we received even yesterday might be sufficiently helpful for us to do something in the next day or two, subject to having a suite of precautions, such as having water, having fire spotters, other infrastructure. A lot of our forest companies even have their own aerial assets, or they have their own fire trucks. So having those in their proximity, that could get us to a bit of a yes. I am cognizant of the fact that a lot of New Brunswickers work in our sawmills, work in the sector itself, and we are running short of wood in a number of those mills.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Alexander. Next is Nick Moore with CTV.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Some of the images and video that we've seen provided from your department has shown that there's been damage to power infrastructure. And I'm just wondering, to what extent is that an issue here, especially when you want people to have their phones charged for alert ready? What has been the impact on not just electricity, power infrastructure, but even telecommunications infrastructure?
So I can't answer that question holistically. The images that you're reporting that you've seen, even pictures from DNR, I've seen them myself. I was part of the boots on the ground on Friday, and you saw a fair amount of the telecommunication infrastructure along the Route 8, really quite compromised. I'm actually surprised by the level of redundancy that we appear to have in the system, because this hasn't been a widespread concern that has got into my particular ear, and I think, given I'm pretty close to this, that's probably not a bad thing. There have been some actions that have taken place that the Forest Protection Unit deserve credit for, and I spoke on Friday about the large telecommunications tower that they proactively, on their own from this unit within DNR, built a fire break around that tower, and it stands tall to today, providing services to New Brunswickers from a communication perspective. I'm going to maybe even suggest it was probably even this as a cell tower, so that these things are still hot in that particular region. So it's got to be a concern. NB Power is probably better poised to be able to answer that question. They do have representation at the Emergency Measures Office, so they're tracking this very closely, I would suspect.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the point that you made about the possibility of lifting restrictions region by region in industries. Everybody's well aware there's a full burn ban in effect for everybody in the province. But when the time does come to start lifting restrictions, is that going to be done on a county by county basis, or will that be all done province-wide, just considering the situation as it is right now?
So my clear instinct on this is that it will be done on a regional or an area-specific basis. I don't know if it would be a county, and I don't know if the rain clouds go exactly follow the county lines or not, but we have other boundaries that we might use to help guide New Brunswickers. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that I do not envision a province-wide lifting of recreational activities, commercial activities, sort of all at once. I think that we want to open things up as quickly as we can. New Brunswickers have been so helpful, vital to our efforts with respect to preventing forest fires. New Brunswickers get it. They all want to do the right thing to take care of one another. We want to get them back in the woods when it's appropriate as soon as we can. They know this is not a forever situation, so we won't wait for the entire province to be perfect before we take some initiatives to open up the province. But again, the conditions have to be right.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Nick. Our last reporter is Suzanne Lapointe with Global.
Hi there. I spoke to a forestry professor today who says clear cutting may have contributed to the spread of the fires. Is the province looking at additional regulations on clear cutting to reduce risks?
So I've heard folks even say that clear cutting actually has been helpful in some situations as well, because the fuel mix isn't there anymore. It's almost like it serves as a version of a bit of a fire break. So I'll take that question back to my officials itself. But we harvest in different ways for different species. Clear cutting is part of it. Selective harvest is part, and just as a sort of fun fact for New Brunswickers to understand in terms of what our annual allowable cut is and how we harvest our woods, is that New Brunswick is essentially 86% forested. We harvest about 1.7% of the forest each year. Of that 1.7% of the forest each year, half of that is clear cut. So only 0.8% of the forest per annum is actually clear cut, and then it begins to regenerate, whether that is assisted through planting, and half of the clear cut is assisted through planting, and the other half regenerates naturally.
So for my follow-up, you mentioned that tree planting may be permitted soon. So studies have shown that planting only conifers in clear-cut area can also contribute to the spread of wildfires. Are you looking at mandating more diversified tree planting?
So we kind of do that now, and that was a stat that I guess I would said. So going back to that 1.7% that we harvest each year. Half of that harvest is done on a selective basis. Half of it is done by clear cuts. So that's the 0.8% of the forest each year, and half of that 0.8 is allowed to rejuvenate naturally. So you will have a mixed forest, and the 0.4% is those would be planted stands. Even in those planted stands, after the seedlings start to grow, you do get a degree of forest diversity. I will point out, though, given the Oldfield fire, for example, and how tinder dry the forest was, the forest behavior folks at DNR said there wasn't any difference in this particular circumstance, given how dry it was, whether it was like a hardwood tree or softwood tree.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Suzanne. Minister, do you have any closing remarks?
Other than, so New Brunswick The firefighters that we have at DNR, they put their shoulders to the wheel in very daunting conditions. They did their magic in a way that prevented any loss of structure thus far. I'm heartened, impressed, inspired by their skill, dedication, courage. Blood, sweat, and tears. I'm sure there was some of that all through all of that. New Brunswickers, thank you very, very much for understanding why we had to take these precautions that we've had over this past week. We will get behind this very, very soon. We'll have more victories, just like we had with the Oldfield fire earlier this morning. Stick with us, and together we'll get this done in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.
That concludes today's update. Thank you. Voici la fin de notre conférence de presse. Merci.